I'm going to stop the animation at this point and go to our color swatch for the particles. I'm going to choose white as our color for the particles. And say OK. Let's go back to the top here just to make this move along here a little bit faster. And the next thing I'm going to do is to that layer I'm going to apply a little bit of a blur effect to sort of smear those particles together and kind of get a little bit better simulation of our wateriness. So I'm going to increase the blurriness here to about 8 or so. I'm going to have it just be a vertical blur, I think. So now let's take a look at that. Let's preview that and see what that looks like. And we're going to have something that in fact looks fairly realistically like a fountain, where we have a spray of water coming out and then falling down. And the blur added by our vertical fast blur is going to smear all these things together here a little bit and create some of the greater illusion of a flow of water in a fountain. Let's take a minute to let that RAM preview cache, and once we do, we'll take a look at it and see what we get in terms of our fountain. Now again, we have a fairly high particle per second, so that we are generating a lot of particles here, and it takes a little bit longer to create this simulation. Plus the blur itself also adds some render time. So we'll just jump ahead to the end of our RAM preview here and check and see what the whole thing looks like. So there we go. As you can see, we have something that looks pretty realistically like a fountain, or at least simulation of a fountain, and that with some tweaking, maybe a different type of particle shape, and maybe a little bit more blur and some other things like that, maybe some color changes in there, we could get a little bit closer simulation, which we're not going to take the time to do right now, but it all is possible. So let's stop that. Let's go back to the top here. I'm going to take out our fast blur for right now and reduce the number of particles to just speed things up here a little bit more. So here we are back at our original settings, more or less. And let's take a look at some of the other properties here in the Canon. So as you can see, we also have a direction property. Now if I just change the angle of the spray here, you can see it will change the position and emission point of those particles. And you can see that as I do, they actually spread out as they get down towards the bottom because they're also being affected by gravity. And when they're pointed down, they're going faster because of gravity than when they're pointed up like that. Because when they're pointed up, of course, they have to counteract gravity. So all of this is the physics that are built into this particle system. So if I take that and spray it off to the side, you see now that all our particles are shooting out from the side in kind of more a realistic sort of Canon type activity. Now, let's go back to about over here or so and look at some of these other properties here, including direction random, which is something that's worth knowing. Now, if I crank that up, you can see that at this point where we are, which is about a second or so into the animation, you can see that increasing that random directionness, or the randomness of the direction, will spread these particles out further. Without any random direction at all, let's take that all the way down to 0. We get a straight stream of particles out, and they're all kind of just spraying out there. There's a little bit of diffusion you can see here in the stream itself, but very little. And increasing the direction randomness is essentially going to increase the spread of those particles, but also the randomness of the motion of those particles. And there we are cached. So now, by increasing the random direction, we're increasing the width of the spray in a way that's different than increasing the barrel radius. Let's take the random direction down and increase the barrel radius. You can see that the barrel radius starts from a wider point and sends the particles spreading out, whereas a low barrel radius and a large direction random value starts with everything from the same point, but then spreads them further out. So there's a slight difference there in the way that those operate. Now, in the next video, we'll take a look at random velocity and also changing velocity and see how those affect what's going on here in the Canon.